If you've been listening to the podcast for a while and thought, man, I would love to grab a drink and pick the brain of some of these guests I've been listening to, or maybe me as well, here's your shot. I'm putting on an event this April called Elevate. This is the third year doing this, and we're going to be in Phoenix, Arizona, where we're going to have the top agency owners really come together, share what's working, get real on what's not, and really help each other scale faster. So if you're ready to finally get out of the weeds and grow your agency the right way, I want you to join me and 50 other amazing 7 and 8 figure agencies at Elevate. You'll connect with people who've been there, leave with a real growth plan, and actually enjoy the process. Now, we only have a few tickets left, so make sure you go over to elevatemyagency.com to lock in your spot now. Go to elevatemyagency.com now. Hey, Harv, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jason. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, my name is Harv Nagra. I live in the UK, in London, and originally from Vancouver, Canada. I'm kind of always been around the agency and consultancy space, working in marketing kind of environments, marketing and design. And right now I'm working for a company called Scoro as head of brand comms, but I host the Handbook, the operations podcast, where I talk to really brilliant people about running great agencies and consultancies as well.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, let's talk about kind of what you've seen around operations, because a lot of, including me, when I got into the agency business, it was by accident. I was a creative. I knew how to do something cool and kind of fell into it. And so operations kind of took a while for me to really kind of figure out. So what are some things that agency owners need to pay attention to on the ops?
I think, Jason, what you're saying kind of resonates, because a lot of times there's the whole idea of the accidental founder, right? Somebody starts an agency because they're good at something or they're passionate about creating a certain kind of work for their clients. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good at running a business. And that's why, there's I suppose folks like us in the space, trying to help educate and kind of guide people along. But I think that's one of the main things I see is this whole kind of accidental founder thing. And so people kind of fumble along doing best effort, focusing on kind of sales is a big part of it in the early couple of years, because you want to make sure that your concept gets off the ground and you're able to pay your overheads, right? But running the business well is what is kind of neglected. And often I see that this gets left a step or two behind where it should be. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is the idea of business maturity and business maturity models, because that was something I was exposed to a number of years ago when I was moving into kind of an operations director role at my past agency. Our then COO kind of introduced me to this idea, saying, look at it, reflect on this, and tell me where you think our business stands. And that was a really eye-opening idea for me, because intuitively, I thought we were doing pretty well. I had done a lot of work before I was even ops director or in this operations role, trying to get the business in a better space, in a better place, but I didn't really know what I didn't know. And that kind of business maturity model really helped me get a benchmark and understand what we should be aspiring towards.
What was the stuff that you didn't know at the time that you know now?
I think the most fundamental thing is that there's kind of the way I see it is that there's kind of stages in our lives, or like civilization has eras or whatever, right? And we see that, we know that, and we're aware of that. But when it comes to a business, we don't think about it that way. It just seems to be this kind of organic blob that's moving around. You're successful or you're struggling and things like that. But I think what was super interesting to me is that there's tiers to this stuff. Things are super chaotic in the beginning because you're just kind of making things up as you go, picking tools off the shelf. There's no processes documented. There's no consistent way of working. And then you start to kind of grow a bit. And then there tends to be like best practice in pockets. Maybe there's somebody, that is kind of operationally focused in a certain team that just says we need some control or something like that and tries to bring in processes for their team. And then you level up further, and that's where you start kind of documenting, having thoughtfully selected systems and working consistently, start generating good data. So that's a really good place to be. But with each of these levels, there's a smaller and smaller proportion of businesses, agencies that get to that level. So I think that's what's really the thing that we need to be aware of.
I created something a long time ago. I really kind of looked at kind of the stages of my journey through, agency life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be curious to hear about the stages that you're talking about. Like, how do we know which stage we're in? How I did it was I determined what was our biggest challenge, and then that put us in that. And then I was like, all right, well, if we can figure out this challenge, then we can get to the next stage and kind of almost build, like the Egyptian pyramids, right? Like you got to start with that foundation first. So what were the phases or stages that you guys went through?
Yeah. When you look at one of these models, there's tend to be like 5 stages, but the lens that I think way I break it down is looking through the prism of like people challenges, process challenges, data and metrics, technology and tools, and growth strategies. So you might be at a different level within all of those. But if I reflect on my time at that agency before I was ops director, when I first moved in, Jason, like it was well in that chaotic era is the way I describe it, level 1, which was kind of when you sit down and you're a new starter, you would be onboarded basically by whoever you sat next to. And so there was a lot of wishful thinking that they're teaching you best practice, which there was no best practice. There was nothing documented, right? So you kind of learn the bad habits of the person you sit next to, and then that person then starts working that way and that gets passed on. Similarly, other kind of nightmare examples that I remember is that the way quoting was done or budgeting, it was just kind of made up in the sense that we would open up Harvest is what we were using. And you would kind of copy an existing quote that was already in the system and then tweak it for your requirements. But then you lose any insight into whether there was historic pricing connected to that budget that was created in the past, whether there was discounts applied. And so that is a really terrible way to be pricing and running a business. And then
so there was really no leaders, it presume.
There was leaders, but I don't think there was structure, if you see what I mean, right? It was being run very loosely.
Yeah, because I look at it as, especially with that scenario about, looking back at the quoting, like looking at, and this is historical pricing and just doing this. It's just because I've done that. I've gone through that phase many, many, many years ago, as you can look at the color of my beard. And I wasn't a leader back then. And I was a shitty ass manager because I couldn't stand managing people. And looking back, I needed to hire people that could manage themselves, but I needed to give them direction of where they actually needed to go.
Yeah.
And I feel that, we were a leaderless company back then, right? And that's kind of like with your scenario, it's like, yeah, I'll train you. You're sitting next to my cube or you're next to my desk. I'll train you. This is how I've done it. And they're probably making decisions based on what's best for them rather than what's best for the agency because I didn't give it any fucking direction.
Absolutely. And I think in an organization like that, when I think back as well, almost all of us were external facing, client facing, right? And even a number of years forward, Jason, when I was kind of in that operations director role, I'd done a lot of work to help support the agency in kind of maturing some of their systems, some of the way they work, even onboarding and stuff like that, even though that wasn't my job. It was just me kind of stepping in and saying, hey, I can't stand the way things are done like this. It's just, this is a bit of a mess and it's a bit embarrassing. So I'm going to volunteer and just try to fix this. But there came a point, and I think it was just pre-COVID in that organization, where a lot of the senior leaders that we had in the business that were responsible for digital or client services or creative, whatever it was, having almost like an intervention with the 2 co-founders saying that all of us are juggling multiple roles. We're responsible for our teams and for also delivery, but we're also juggling internal roles. Like I'm a part-time ops The creative director is part-time marketing and so on. So we can't just run an organization without having more dedicated resources that are there to make sure the foundations are strong and running optimally.
Hi there, agency owners. Let me ask you, are you ready to scale your agency without increasing your overhead costs? If yes, then you need to know about E2M Solutions. Now, E2M is the #1 most reliable white label partner for agencies. They specialize in web design, WordPress development, e-commerce, SEO, and content writing. They basically do all the heavy lifting, which frees you up to focus on growing your agency. Now, here's the best part. E2M's just not another vendor. With over 10 years of experience, their team of over 300 experts has a track record of delivering for more than 300 agencies. They're your strategic partner. They deliver on time every time, so you can focus on what you do best. Now, E2M's mission is simple: to help 500 agencies increase their revenue and profit margins with white label services that actually work. And to help you get started, they're offering a special deal, 10% off for the first 3 months, but act fast because it's only a limited time offer. So head over to e2msolutions.com/smartagency to check out their transparent and their flexible pricing. Trust me, if you're ready to grow without burning out, E2M's the partner you've been looking for. That's e2msolutions.com/smartagency. Go check them out and tell them Jason Swank sent you.
It just takes time, right? Like it goes back to what I was saying, kind of my origin story is I was an accidental agency owner. I was fired from every single job I've ever had. And so I just didn't know what I didn't know. It's easy looking back now, but people just go through that. So for the ones listening, if you're at that point where you really haven't given direction to your team, like that North Star, that's really kind of gaining that clarity of where you're going, who you want to go after, what you're actually offering. That's kind of the first phase that I see. What's kind of the next phase or stage that you guys went through?
That was already like where I'm mentioning this kind of like intervention happened, too many people. We'd already had a leap in maturity. And one of those leaps came when we moved on from just having kind of like we had multiple entities. That's something I didn't mention. And each of those entities was working very differently as well. So at the end of the year, reporting was done or budgets presented and we looked at how we performed across the group, but everyone was working very differently. So a number of years prior to that kind of COVID intervention, we had a finance director come in. So it went from just like kind of a bookkeeper, just trying to make sure things are invoiced, to a finance director coming in and looking at things and saying, okay, this is a mess and we need to mature the way we work. So that's where I started working very closely with her, and we kind of scrapped the way we were working in terms of the systems we were using. We brought in a more kind of consolidated platform, and for the first time in the organization, wrote kind of documented processes in terms of this is our point of view on how a budget is created and how you then turn it into a project. And that, you're going to have to raise purchase orders. And by the way, this is what a purchase order is because you've never created one before and what the value of that is. And also, you're going to have to track time because that was done very kind of willy-nilly. So there was a huge maturity exercise that went into that process. And after we went through that, the change process is complex in itself, but it went really, really well. That was a huge leap in maturity. And then once this kind of intervention thing happened, I think the co-founders took the point. They ended up hiring kind of an interim COO to come in and kind of audit the operations and stuff like that. And the work we did in the next 18 months was really transformative to kind of get it into future ready, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I was chatting with someone not too long ago at an event I spoke at, and they were like, man, I got to scale. I'm like, well, are you ready to scale? Like they wanted to buy an agency. I was like, tell me a little bit more. And by like asking all these questions, like they weren't ready to scale. And I was like, well, how much, profit are you making? Not much. And they started to get a hold of kind of the finances, right? Like really understand Are they losing money on clients? And they had maybe 25% of their clients they were losing money on. I'm like, well, I don't understand, but they're paying the salary of our team. And I'm like, but you're losing money. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And, to get that snapshot, I look back at before we were tracking time, I thought we were making profit on all of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
When we started tracking time, I was losing money on 60% of our engagements. 60%.
Not surprising, right?
Right? Like, we were profitable too on, as a business. So when I got a look at that, I was like, man, what's broken? It's my pricing. And then a lot of people will say from there, they're like, all right, well, your pricing's broken, but how do I get clients that will actually pay that price? I'm like, well, the pricing is just an indicator. Your sales pipeline, your positioning, your marketing, your sales, that's the real broken thing that we need to focus on. And when we did that, then that's when the agency really started taking off. And going to your last point about bringing in like an operations person, now you can focus on scope creep.
Mm-hmm.
You can focus on, where are the profit leaks in the agency, that we can actually fix. And then I feel like you have that foundation that you can, take it wherever you want.
Absolutely.
After you guys brought in kind of the interim COO, what's kind of the next phase? We talked about, gaining clarity, really kind of getting a hold of, the finances, like, are we making money? Are we losing money? That kind of stuff. And now about operations, what's the next two levels that you saw?
So we were already working fairly consistently, but what we needed to do was our data was not in a great spot, right? So we had brought in a better system, but it was still a bit archaic and reporting was still difficult and that kind of thing. So we did decide to kind of upgrade our tech stack. So there was a few things that were necessary. Again, there was that big work from home thing that was happening at the time because we were all in lockdown and so on. So kind of changing the way we communicate and being, ready for work from home, we changed our platform to one that allowed us to kind of collaborate across borders really fluidly. Because like I said, we were multi-entity and there were times when I would have to kind of time track on a project in France or Switzerland, for example, or vice versa. So we needed to be able to do that and report in a single place. So that's something we did. We upgraded our systems and then really kind of leaning into learning and understanding kind of the metrics we needed to track and just improving our reporting so that we could forecast revenue and capacity and that kind of thing, Jason, so that we weren't just kind of guessing at what was going to be happening in the coming months or the coming quarters, but actually had a bit of a preview, if that makes sense, in terms of, do we have too many people that are going to be sitting on the bench, or is there going to be enough, or is there too much work and we need to find a way to either bring in some freelancers or push out the deadlines or whatever it might be. So that kind of being more data driven was a big part of that maturity exercise. But also another thing that I think was a big part of it was a bit of restructuring. I think this person coming in was quite experienced and very business orientated. I don't know if there's probably a better way of saying what I want to say, but just being a little bit less removing some of the emotion from the decision making and just saying, just because this person's been there since the beginning doesn't mean that they are suitable, the right person in that right seat for the next 10 years. So there was some difficult decisions that were made, but ultimately that led to us being a little bit leaner and structured in a better way.
It's tough, right? Like, we build our babies and we treat the agency as our baby, which is a mistake. And I went through this when I sold my agency. I felt like I sold my identity. I felt like, well, who am I? Like, I was an agency owner for 12 years for the first agency. And I was like, that was me. But I didn't realize until I went to a stupid Tony Robbins event and walked on fire and did that stupid shit. And I was like, oh, wait, I'm creative, I'm innovative, and that kind of stuff. And it actually helped. I just don't like the kumbaya stuff that they do. But, getting rid of some of the people that started with you is tough, right? Because you kind of treat them as, family, close friends. Like, I even had a business partner that the business outgrew. You just got to realize that you constantly need to grow. That's what I realized. It was kind of like, who do I need to bring in? But who do I actually need to become was a big mind shift, a big pivot for me of going, who do I need to become in order to get us to where we need to be versus I think a lot of agency leaders and owners, they feel like I've taken it this far. I have no clue how to get to the next level. And then that's when they want to sell, or they turn it over to someone else, or they bring in, God forbid, a CEO from a big agency that is used to 1,000 resources and they're not resourceful, and then they blow up the agency, right? Like I've seen it 1,000 times.
No, totally. I read a book a couple years ago by the co-founders of Netflix. I think it was called No Rules Rules, Netflix and the culture of something or other, the culture of reinvention. And I think one thing that always I remember from that book was saying it's a mistake to say that the people that work for you are family. And there's a tendency sometimes to say that we're like a family, but that's not how it should be. You should see it like almost like a sports team.
Yep.
Where players, you might outgrow them, they might outgrow you, and they need to be swapped for someone that's more suited for your organization at that time. So saying that you're a family is a mistake in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you're into, baseball or football or whatever it is, and one person's just, they're getting up there in age and they're not as fast as they need to score, goals or touchdowns or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they should be the coach. What kind of position can I put them in where they could actually be successful and then the business be successful? And sometimes it is a hard decision. You got to say, thank you for this, and let me set you up going forward, and you take care of that person, and they'll be happier. Because if they're the ones being the anchor, take it from someone that's always been fired from every single job. Like, it was the best thing, right? Like, I wasn't happy at these jobs, but my thing was I'm not a quitter. So they had to fire me, and then I was free. Because now I wasn't a quitter. I was just a shitty employee. And then I could go do my own stuff. So, but fun. Well, awesome, man. Well, Harv, I really do appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this with us. And for everyone listening, we created an amazing AI software that acts as your AI CFO. So, kind of going back to what Harv was saying about kind of the stage 2, right? Getting your finances in order. What AskQuick.ai does is connect into QuickBooks and make sense of your data and gives you suggestions. You can ask it questions. Where is my revenue going? Who am I paying the most expenses to? Who are my most profitable clients? Can I actually afford this? Ask it questions. It will give you advice. So make sure you go there. Try it out for 7 days for free. Go to AskQuick.ai. And until next time, have a swank day.